Back in the 60s, when my father first came over, the jobs were like factory jobs.
I know to be, working as a waitress up to, 35 or something like that.
A lot of the then new people that had come over had a dream that they would be their own boss and not have to take orders.
Never expected to be a shopkeeper, but John says this is our chance to better ourselves.
I first came over here on a working holiday to improve my accent, which is quite difficult because the black country accent is not like proper English.
The Corner Shop is a big social history project that's looking at how shops have changed over the past 60 years across the black country.
I have a degree, but it's not worth anything here.
I started to fall in love with the place. So many different people and different cultures. It is not like this in Poland.
Did you know? I am from a long line of shopkeepers.
I used to work in administration, policies and readings, papers, information. I will open a newsagent.
We are not going to be a newsagent.
200 years of shopkeeping running through our blood.
He died in that shop.
I am a businessman.
The whole process began with a whole sort of series of interviews where we trained up people from within the community to go and interview current shopkeepers and sort of previous owners of shops, small shops, so corner shops. That was the sort of starting point, going and doing those interviews. They formed the basis for us to create the production. So they're the source material for us to actually create the site-specific promenade production that we're working on at the moment.
A few years ago, Black Country Touring worked with Foresight Theatre and English Heritage on another project called Upnagar. From somewhere, the idea of doing something about shops came up, and that partnership was reformed. We were all interested in the idea of doing something about shops. However, we knew we wanted to be much more ambitious than the previous time. We extended the partnership to include Sandwell Museum Service, Sandwell Archives, and Birmingham's Connecting Histories project, which is run by Birmingham Archives and Heritage. We trained a team of about 7 people in archive research.
I've got some hacks for you. One thing they've got in is structuring code of conduct. This is our code of conduct, but you'll find when you go to archives that they're all basically the same. So they'll all have some simple rules, which include, for instance, always using pencils, which might seem a bit weird, but it's because we have original documents, and partly it's to stop people from forging their documents. And partly it is because, you know how easy it can be, if you've got a pen in your hand, you turn a page and you sort of go whoosh across the page and you mark it with a ballpoint pen or something, and then of course that's very expensive for us to get a conservator to remove that mark. So we always ask people to use pencils in the research room. The Corner Shop Archive is a series of oral history recordings which have been pulled together through the Corner Shop project. Oral history recordings and also photographs which have been taken as part of the project to record corner shops in the local area. And also the other activities of the project. So there'll be evidence in the archive of the theatre production and the exhibition and all the activities associated with the Corner Shop project. The project is really capturing a moment in time which would probably not be recorded in any other way. The changes in population, the migration into the area, because that is quite recent history and doesn't tend to be reflected in our collections otherwise. And it is a very, very social change, and it's a very kind of rapid change. And it's hard in the archive world where you're relying on documentary evidence coming to you after some time to keep up with those very swift changes. It is definitely the social change and then the new communities coming in which are perfectly captured through changing corner shops.
And if we think about history and what it is, most of what has been recorded over the years has tended to kind of reflect a particular aspect of society, a particular section of society, so it would have to be the influential, the rich, the powerful and so on. And so history is skewed in that respect, that the vast majority of material that's contained within archives, that's contained within various other sources, museums, were either collected by or belong to people who were in influential positions and positions of power, rich, wealthy, whoever it might be. So when we try to understand the lives of ordinary folk, ordinary people, we find that there's a huge gap. I always refer to it as a deficit in social knowledge that relates to a particular section of our society. What we tend to find is that generally people are probably not used to telling their story because people don't see that there's value in their own story as an ordinary person. But I can see it being incredibly affirmative, being put into a position to be able to talk about yourself and your history and your experiences. The Cornershop Project would have given Cornershop owners a fantastic opportunity to reflect upon what it is that they've been doing all their life, to make connections between themselves and the outside world, and to make sense of it.
I mean, archives, they're essentially the memory. Our memory. We don't have so much of an oral culture of memory. We're about documenting, and that memory informs us who we are. If we didn't have them, it's like being amnesiac, basically. You don't know your own identity. You don't know who you are or where you've come from. So what we're doing now in keeping archives of time as it is now is making sure that people in 100 years' time know where they've come from and why changes happened and how we've become what we've become.
Foresight Theatre's education officer ran a mini schools project which ran parallel to the theatre production. We worked with 2 schools in Sandwell. They went and explored their local high street and the shops on their high street. And initially there was a reluctance from shop owners letting a bunch of, young sort of 10-year-olds coming into their shop. But that soon changed, and you had wonderful explorations where you had kids communicating with shop owners, talking about what's the difference between Polish bread and English bread. And then they worked with a designer, as well as a sound artist and the education officer from Foresight, to create their own mini site-specific promenade theatre production. There was such a strong sense of self-esteem and confidence and a brightness in the kids, performing this work with a confidence that the teacher commented you don't ordinarily see in the class. You could see that it had had a very overwhelmingly positive effect on them.